Hey everybody, Mr. Evans here, coming at you with the last new stuff for our first unit, Humans and the Environment. All right. Just to recall, we did Neolithic Revolution, the change from hunting and gathering to farming. We looked at nuclear energy, both the good and the bad sides of it. And our last topic on this is climate change. You know, the most significant issue facing the world currently. So a couple questions. Well, actually, just one question here. Based on this map, on which continents did humans first appear? So this is a map of how humans traveled around the Earth, how we got to the different continents and places on Earth. And the key here is to trace the arrows back to the beginning. So all these arrows are going back, 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 back to the origin in Africa. The first human beings lived in Africa. They lived in a place called the Great Rift Valley. And today, those countries are called Ethiopia and Kenya. From there, they slowly walked around the world following the animals. They were hunters and gatherers, right? My ancestors walked out of Africa through the Middle East, took a left, and became Europeans. Other people's ancestors took a right, became Asians. Some kept going into Australia. And then some walked. Asia and North America used to be connected. That's how human beings got to North America, right? And some even walked all the way south in South America, all right? But we all come from Africa. The human species starts in Africa. All right, climate change. 3 ways climate change is having detrimental. Detrimental is a fancy word for negative. Having detrimental impacts on our world. So there's countless ways. The ones we talked about, we said melting ice leading to rising sea levels, also melting ice leading to higher temperatures because that ice was like a mirror that bounces the heat back into space. We talked about desertification, where good land becomes a desert. The process of becoming a desert is literally what that word means. We talked about stronger storms. As the water warms up, storms get stronger, devastating peoples in many parts of the world. All right? So those are just to name a few of these things of the negative impacts of climate change, which will affect every human being on Earth. So what can we do? It's like overwhelming, right? This is such a big problem. No one country can solve it. No one individual can solve it. But every little bit counts. Don't feel like, oh, I can't solve it, so it's not worth doing anything. No, we can pressure governments and we can make changes in our own life. So let's talk about what we can do. All right? It is kind of like dominoes, though. We are interconnected. And so climate change will require the cooperation of every country. There's one group on Earth that can do that, and that's called the United Nations. The United Nations, their headquarters in Manhattan, and at least once a year, every country comes together to talk about the big issues facing the world. All right? We're going to need everybody working together to address the problem, or we're just going to see one thing happen leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. It's dominoes fall. I don't know. When I was a kid, people taught me the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Best thing we can do is reduce the amount of stuff we buy and use. That's why things like the plastic ban on bags in New York City went into effect. It's far better just carry around like a canvas bag or something and reduce the amount of trash and waste and production, because we know fossil fuels are used to make those plastic bags. It's pollution on many levels. So try to reduce that. Even like thinking like when I order off of Seamless now, there's an option that says forego the plastic utensils. So they'll bring me the food, but they won't bring like the plastic fork, knife, and spoon or whatever. Even that little bit, right? It's just reduce the amount you use. Reuse your stuff. Don't throw stuff away, all right? Try to get the most out of it. And the least, I know people like make a big deal about recycling. It's really not, it doesn't have that big an impact. You're going to see that on the next slide. Now, it's better to recycle than not to recycle, but barely. Recycling is not the solution to climate change. Reducing is. Reusing helps. Recycling, So look, here are personal choices you can make in your life. The ones on the right have a big impact on climate change. The ones on the left have little impact on climate change. So replacing your light bulbs with like those energy efficient light bulbs, that has a tiny impact. Here's recycling, really small impact. Like just to give you a sense, washing your clothes in cold water instead of hot water has a bigger impact than recycling. Now the big ones, people choosing to have less babies is the most significant thing an individual can do to help climate change. Second is to live without a car. That's why people in New York, we tend to pollute less than everybody else because lots of us don't have cars. And one thing is cut back, try to cut back on air travel. Airplanes are horrible for the environment because they release the pollution way up in the sky, which has like a detrimental effect. All right, so let's keep going here. We'll tease some of these out. So here's plastic. I said fossil fuels are used to make plastic, and then at the end of the day, they create this awful pollution. There's like, plastic, like, I don't know, like as far as the eye can see in some parts of the ocean. They don't biodegrade. That means they don't like break down and become part of the earth for thousands and thousands of years. And most of the world's plastic is still around, right? Only a little tiny bit of it gets recycled. Most of it just goes into a landfill and stays there for thousands of years. Really, really bad. So try to reduce the amount of plastic, even if it's like the plastic bag, whatever the case might be. Having a reusable water bottle instead of buying a water bottle all the time. That makes a little difference. Public transportation, we saw that people not owning cars is a big deal. Public transportation reduces fossil fuels emissions by a lot. It's like this cartoon makes it pretty clear. All these cars, all this pollution, all this traffic could be replaced by one bus, which is so much cleaner and more efficient. And we do a good job in this. This is counties with the most people using public transportation, all the way here with the most. Kings County, Brooklyn, New York. So if the entire country commuted like we did, we'd be in a much better situation. And just look at New York City. So the best counties for public transportation: Brooklyn, followed by Bronx, followed by Manhattan, followed by Queens, right? So the New York City boroughs are doing a good job with this, and I wish more of the country took public transportation. We can, as I said, fly less. Airplanes reduce really large amounts of pollution in the atmosphere, which has a huge impact. So look at this. This is the amount of pollution per vehicle. Here are airplanes, by far the worst. Here are trains, by far the best. All right? So if you have an option, sometimes you have to travel. That's just life, right? You got to go overseas. You got to go, whatever the case, to see family. But it's really, 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 really detrimental, the people that fly like all the time. Eat less meat. I mentioned this yesterday. Our diets are terrible. Meat production is terrible for the earth. It's also really not that good for your health either. I'm not saying become a vegan or vegetarian, but try to cut down on it. Because look at this. 1/4 pound hamburger takes over 6.5 pounds of grain, 53 gallons of water, 75 square feet of land, and tons of energy to produce just 1/4 pound hamburger. All right. Now, a 1/4 pound of rice or a 1/4 pound of pasta is so much better. It doesn't use nearly this amount of stuff. So try to reduce, even if it's 1 meal a day or 2 meals a week, reduce the amount of meat you eat. And the last one, this is a really hard one because it's really hard to convince people to have less children. But if people around the world had less babies, it would really, really, really make a huge difference on the future of climate change. Because I like this, these are the resources we have in this world, and all these new babies are dragging and sinking it down. But again, it's really hard to convince people of that, and that's a personal decision people make. But at the end of the day, less people will mean a less strain on the environment. All right, kiddos, next class we'll be reviewing for our first test. Reach out with questions. Bye.